Welcome to Board Game Binge, the place where we bring you bite-sized, bingeable board game content from across the industry. I'm your host, James Staley, and in this episode, we're chatting with Aaron Smith, founder of Littlest Lantern and designer of Sea Beasts, which just crushed it on Kickstarter. Aaron, welcome to the binge. How you doing, sir?
Doing good, thank you. That's a nice intro. This is my
Oh,
first podcast ever, by the way, too.
are you serious? Your first
Yeah.
one? Oh my gosh.
Yep.
I'm honored. I'm honored. I
Yeah.
get to be the first one. Well,
Yeah.
Aaron, you and I just literally met like 2 minutes ago as we logged on here, and I'm excited to get to meet you. This campaign absolutely crushed it. You did amazing,
Yeah.
and I know I was just saying off air, Canadian dollars always sounds larger, but you're at like $950,000 on this campaign, which is just
So
massive.
good.
I'm so jelly. You did, but well deserved, man. Well deserved, and I can
Thank
see all
you.
the tools on your campaign page, and you're doing all the right things to make this
Yeah.
happen. We're going to get into this on this episode, but
Mhm.
first I want to start with. How did you get into this industry? Like, did I read somewhere you were like an engineer at first, and then you kind of backed your
Yeah.
way into this, or how did that all come about?
Yeah. From my whole life, I've loved fantasy. I've loved film. I've loved games, and I also was playing Legos over the Christmas break, and I forgot how much I love those too.
Ah,
But
there you
just
go.
like the creation side of imagination and all the fantastical stories that come out of that, it's always been a part of my life.
Yeah,
But it was really like you said, I was trained mechanical engineer, and then they pushed me right into project management, and then I've been in a ton of different industries, from like tech, from automotive to robotics to lots of different ones, even like beer and wine too. I was in the beer and wine industry for a while, working on like big automated breweries and going to visit wineries when they were trying to expand. That was my favorite one. But when the pandemic hit, obviously that all got dampened. So
yeah,
it gave me a lot of free time to kind of explore my creative side of things. And I was working on some video games actually. Like I was trying to code in some video games, and so I was like, maybe I'll spend time doing that. But I like had been developing this like new world. I was like writing a fantasy novel too. So my first 6 months of 2020, when I was unemployed, I just wrote a fantasy novel, and I was like, I got seven more in this world that I want to write, but I was like, I can't just do this full time as like a startup writer kind
yeah.
of thing. And at the same time, I was doing a D&D homebrew with my wife and like two other couple friends of ours. And I had like it was so much fun to like create this world for them to experience.
Yeah.
And it was like all these moving parts at the same time. I was still trying to do the video game too, and I was modeling it on the table. I was like, this looks more like a board game, so I'll start developing it as a board game. And so I just kind of basically, after I wrote that first novel, I just started designing games for the next 6 months of 2020. I was like, this is pretty cool, and was getting into the hobby, and was like, I think I should start really pursuing this, like meaning like I should like look into hiring artists, graphic designers. Like I want to make this thing something big.
Yeah.
So that adventure started in 2020, and kind of since then it was a lot of late nights because I had to go back to work when I could.
Yeah.
So it was basically just sacrificing my evenings to just keep working on games. That first game I actually designed isn't Sea Beast. It's another game that I'm working on the side, but
Nice.
uh, it's kind of blown my mind learning about board games and how many revisions of the game, like how many times it has to go through revision to like get to a final product. I
Yeah.
think I've For that first one, I think I went through like 10 different prototypes where it's just drastically changing every single time. And
Now, had you
uh,
ever done any kind of design, like game design prior to that, even when like you're younger, or was this like literally your first kick at the can
I
type of thing?
mean, not like not clean game design. Like I would always be the guy who would come up with like the imaginary game at recess kind of
Sure.
thing.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah,
I'd be
yeah.
like, here's the rules.
But an
Like this is
actual
what we're
like board game. This is like your first kind of like
never. That was
adventure.
the first thing.
Wow.
Yeah.
Good for
So
you. And then was it,
yeah.
so were you like a freelance engineer then, or were you working for a specific company, or how did that work?
No, I was working for different companies. So I was, yeah, it was just traditional employment. And then when I got a break from it, when I got all the time back to myself,
Yeah.
that was when it was like, okay, I can just pour out all this creative stuff that had kind of been brewing in my head for years.
This
So
kind of reminds me when I look at the pandemic, and
yeah,
that was a monumental shift I think across the board,
yeah,
globally, right? And the number of podcasts that sprung up during that, and the number of times I've talked to even creators like yourself who said,
yeah,
I was stuck at home and I was going crazy, right? I wasn't allowed to
yeah,
leave the house, and so I started kind of working on some stuff to kind of occupy my time. How
yeah,
much that really pushed the world to, I think, in a positive way. There's obviously negatives that come out of it, and a lot of people
totally.
complain about the education system and some of the shifts that
Yeah,
happened there. Although one thing I would say is that most online infrastructures were brought up to date, right? At least here in Canada, and I think in the States as well, where if you think pre-COVID, it was kind of hit or miss. Some areas were great with online video conferencing.
right.
Others were kind of spotty. Some of the schools were very effective at using it as a tool. Others, the idea of doing an online video class with the students, it was kind of foreign, right? So I think it brought everybody kind of up to date in that regard. And
Yeah,
I think it kind of equated to like when someone has worked for a company for a number of years and then they get laid off or they get packaged out, right? And they have to kind of do that gut check to say, okay, I was on this path because it was the path I was on. And
yep,
now that I've been forced to, right? And sometimes it takes somebody to kick you out of the nest, right? Forced to
totally.
now kind of review, sit back and kind of do a gut check and kind of look at my life and look at what it is I'm doing and what brings me fulfillment.
Yeah,
Am I going to continue on this path, or should I maybe explore some other things? And we had the unique benefit, I think, of COVID with some of these kind of forced stay at home
hmm
protocols and so forth. It really forced people to actually take that time and figure that out. And I think that actually worked out to be a good thing for many people. And it's
yeah,
cool to kind of hear that this podcast was just going into COVID when we started this podcast. One of
amazing.
my favorite podcasts is Smartless, right? That was started during
Uh-huh.
COVID, right? With those guys. So,
Yeah,
I think it's something that people will look back 10 years from now and they'll really see that as a pivotal moment for, I think, the hobby board game industry, of really seeing kind of an explosion in innovation as well
mhm,
as, indie producers kind of jumping in, right?
absolutely. Yeah, and I totally forgot about this until just now too, but like I was actually going to start another business ahead of 2020, which was a bar and restaurant. And I was about to pull a bank loan for like some obscene amount just to
Yeah.
do the startup and the build out. And that was in no, it was February 2020 that I was
Mm.
going to be pulling that bank loan. And then I lost my job and I was like, I'll still do the restaurant. And I
Yeah.
waited another couple weeks and all the shutdown was still happening. I was like, I'll do something different.
Yeah.
So it was
And we think of
amazing.
crowdfunding, right? So let me use that as an analogy here,
Yeah,
right? So crowdfunding is a way to really reduce a lot of risk for people looking to do
exactly.
business for themselves. And this would be the equivalent in this case of all the people that were going to visit that bar over the next 3 years, prepaying for their drinks
Right.
before you go and open up the bar, right? And that's basically what crowdfunding is, right? Is people
Yep.
prepaying for a copy of a game before you go and manufacture it. Obviously, in today's environment, you have to invest, right? And it's kind of that kind of whole balance of bootstrapping. So how do I bootstrap this in a way where I'm not spending too much money? But there is some investment to make sure you do this in a proper way if you want to hit some of those higher numbers. But for the most part, your risk really is really eliminated because is, for lack of a better word, a pre-order system, right? So
Exactly. Yeah.
yeah, I'm so glad that you didn't do the bar thing and you did the
I
board
know.
game industry, right?
Exactly. Yeah, I'm way more it's this industry has like kind of blown me away too.
Yeah,
Like the more I was getting into it and the more I was meeting people, other publishers, people like you too.
yeah,
It's a much different industry from tech because it's less competitive on
yeah,
its face. Like people are more of like we were talking this before we started too, but like kind of uplifting each other,
yeah.
in the creative space, just because we want to see more cool games come out.
It's
And
highly collaborative. Most people who are producing
yeah,
games are also consumers of games,
yep, right.
right?
That makes total sense. So.
Yeah. And where did Littlest Lantern come from? I'm curious about this, the story behind this logo and company name.
Yeah, so that actually came from that novel I started
Mm.
writing. So this whole series is kind of I'm going back and forth if I'm going to call it the Littlest Lantern, like as a book series or
Yeah.
not. But basically, one of the characters has a lantern in the story, and it's a pretty central point of the story too. So, and when I was founding this publishing company, my goal is not just games, but books and graphic novels and all that stuff eventually. So the heart of it was kind of from this story that I was like, I'll just name the whole company after it. So yeah.
Oh, it's amazing. And then, so was the creative writing like? Is this something you did when you're younger? Like, it just seems like such a big thing to do with no prior experience. Is like, what
Right.
was kind of the seed of that?
I mean, I had creative writing classes growing up.
Mm.
Like there was one specifically I remember in middle school, where I was like, I get to write about anything? That's cool.
Yeah,
And it was a terrible story, I'm sure, but like it was just so fun to like I would write something like something happens, and then I was like, what happens next? And then just keep writing it and just kind of discovering the story as I was writing. So it was
yeah.
kind of more that style of approach as compared to like coming up with a full outline ahead of time. And I just had tons of fun with that. And I think I also wrote comics in elementary school and like all through, like I just loved comics. So I
Yeah.
grew myself. They were also terrible, but um, I don't know. It's just kind of something that's always been in my mind, just kind of coming up with stories. How do people react to really difficult situations? I just like playing out those things. And I think pen and paper is a great medium for that.
I
It's
think
really
lack of fear too, right? Sometimes I think people can be afraid to, maybe imposter syndrome or
Mhm.
whatever of not
Oh yeah,
approaching something like that. Like somebody might be very interested in comics, but never have the idea of, well, maybe I could do something like that because they might think, well, who am I to be a guy that or woman to do this, right?
right.
And it's kind of putting that fear aside, saying, no, I'm going to try this. Nothing may come of this, and that's okay.
Right.
It's just the
Hmm.
creative process that you go through. I think we all have that creative outlet that we have to find,
Yeah.
whatever it is, right? And I think happiness really comes from finding a way, whether it be scrapbooking. Right? My wife, she's a big
Mhm.
scrapbooker, or whatever. I've got a buddy who's a geocacher. Whatever that outlet is, you should try to at least dip your toe into it because you'll probably you'll find yourself just a much happier person, right? Having that outlet.
Totally. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Absolutely.
So Sea
Yeah.
Beast
That.
was the second game you said, right? What was the first? What was the first? Can you talk about the first game at all, or the first idea, or why did you shelve the first idea and do Sea Beast,
Yeah.
Beast first?
So the first idea was a much larger scale co-op.
Mm,
And what I found with designing co-ops was that it takes I think it takes a lot more than a competitive game to
yeah,
balance because you want it to be challenging enough to make it interesting for the players. Like it has to be a a huge challenge, but it also has to be possible to beat it. And that's kind of like the scaling balance that I was playing with this first game. The title of it is Fireline. And so
mm,
I'm still thinking that I'll probably publish it sometime soon, but it's a little bit on the back burner just because it is it's a much bigger cooperative system that
mm,
I was building out. And CB's kind of naturally came out of a BGG contest, which was it was a micro game contest for where I had 9 cards and 24 components to design the whole game with. Um, and I was just sitting there thinking, like, what could I even do with 9 cards? And I was like, what if one of the cards is a boat and the rest of them are just monsters? I was like, okay, I can start working with that. And that's kind of where Sea Beast was born out of. And it was a much tighter cooperative system that just it worked right when I designed it. And it was like, this is fun, it's challenging. I can scale it in challenge pretty easily too.
yeah,
And I can also expand off of this idea really easily. And so that's kind of why that one just kind of jumped into the lead. Also, when I started pitching the idea to friends when it was still just a couple cards, I was like, it's Vikings versus monsters, and when you slay the monsters, you're drawing their blood and using it for more actions. And everybody's like, oh dang, that's cool. So yeah,
Any thoughts around doing like a pocket, going back to that initial and doing like a pocket version of this game at some point?
yeah, actually, there's I have been in the works on something like that. So
That
yeah,
would be cool.
probably in like after we d deliver the first game, there might be something that comes out pretty soon, right after.
So
Yeah.
CB, so talk me to this game. So for those who don't know CB, and I'm going to show it
Mhm.
on the screen here for people that are watching on the live or on the replay. Can you explain again? Congrats on the funding, because I mean you
Thank you.
absolutely crushed it, man. Like I don't know what this is in US dollars, but in Canadian dollars, you're close to $1 million. What is this game? It's a co-op, but can you explain kind of the gist of how people would play this game and kind of what
Mhm.
this how this would kind of play through?
Yeah. So it's a cooperative I call it an ocean crawler. It's not a dungeon crawler because you're on the ocean. You play as Vikings sailing across the sea. You have precious cargo on board. And I might have mentioned 1 to 2 players. So it's a smaller boat. It's not a long ship, but it's a little merchant boat. And you're trying to supply all your ports with enough goods to survive through the next winter. However, the waters are cursed with sea beasts. So you're going to be constantly sailing tough water, navigating your ship's route, but also having to fight against all the monsters that come out to face you. Um, and yeah, you lose if you sink, you lose if you lose your cargo, but you win if you make it to port safely. So
And you got a ton of minis in here as well. And what role do the
yeah.
minis play?
So you'll encounter different depths of water. So there's shallow, deep, and abyss. So
Mm-hmm.
in the abyss is where you're going to find those big, massive monster
Yeah,
boss
cool.
battles. So that's where those like minis will come out. We call them the legendary beasts. So that's kind of where it changes the whole pace of the game when one of those emerges. Yeah.
They're super cool. The for those I'll try to describe this. I mean,
Yeah.
you've got some really highly detailed. I'll call them miniatures, but I mean they're huge. One is like 80 centimeters tall, and
Yep.
it's you've got even like the kraken and so forth. Like, so who
Mhm.
designed the actual like the creatures themselves? Like these are like really
Yeah.
these are showpieces, right? Something you'd even put on your shelf.
Exactly. Yeah. So we that was actually one of the hardest things to find
Yeah.
when I got to this point of the design where I was like, I need to hire an artist. That was probably like a 6 month process finding the artist. I originally found one guy who I absolutely loved his style, and he would have been perfect for it, but he was too expensive and it took too much time for him, and he was like, I want to do this so bad, but like I know I'm too expensive, I know it'll take too much time.
Yeah.
So I asked him like, hey, could you give me a recommendation for like a couple of like people you think would be good for this project? And so one of the people that he suggested was Corey Godby, and he has been a godsend. So he came on, and we were still designing the game back then too. So he started, I think, with the legendary beasts that you'll see, like those big ones. We have one that's kind of like a Godzilla take
Yep.
on like bursting out of the water, but
I
kind
love
of
the
more,
crab. The crab is super cool.
yeah, the crustacean.
Yeah.
It, I think that one is one of my favorites too. Yeah, you have like waterfalls coming off of the claws
Yeah.
itself, and it's all very vibrant. Which that was something that Corey normally leans towards kind of more muted, like natural colors. But I was like, I want this to like splash and like kind of be like very vibrant, bloody, but not grotesque.
Hmm.
Um, so it was a very fun thing, kind of working out what this world looked like with him. And then for the miniatures, that was actually Bryce from Black Magic.
Mm.
So he did amazing with adapting kind of the 2D art into that 3D space.
Yeah.
And we're actually going through with our manufacturer right now, trying to like make sure that we can pull all that detail in as well. So
Yeah.
it's been a fun process, and I'm pretty surprised with how capable the injection molding is these days too. Like we can get so much detail on it. So very excited to see those come out.
And I imagine too, from your background, you probably have some experience in that regard as well, like from structural
Yeah.
engineering to like molds and things like this as well, right?
Yeah, I actually worked at an injection molder for just under a year
Oh,
too.
amazing.
That was the first job I got out of the pandemic, and it was kind of like a easy, quick job. But I was like, oh, hey, like I can understand this industry really well, understand how to design molds and what things will work, what won't work. So that's actually probably going to come through in all my games. That
Yeah,
kind
I
of
find there's usually something that most people can pull through, right? So even if this is someone's newest entry into the industry, there's
experience.
some skill that they can bring over, whether it be
Mhm.
project management or whether it's someone that's good at just working the phones and networking. It's amazing
Right.
how important that is, right? In kind of finding the right people. Writing, creative design, any like literally, if there's anything in your life, is usually transferable into this industry, right? And then you just kind of
Yeah,
build out the skill sets from there, right? And you
exactly.
talk to enough people that have those skills, and people will point the right way, right?
Totally.
This wipeable board. Can you talk a little bit about that? I saw that in one of the. I think it was the Tabletop Vibes guys that were like
Yeah.
vibing pretty hard on this. They really loved it. What you talk to me about the kind of the board? So that's the crawling part, right? Where you're kind of charting your course through the thing. Can you talk a little bit about
Yeah,
that?
so there's a dry erase aspect to the
Yeah.
game. So this actually came mostly from just the beast health, like marking off the beast
Mm.
health when you damage them. Because the thing I was struggling with was, do I have tons of tokens on the card, or do I have clips on it, or like a dial? Um, and I tested so many different things, and I was like, the easiest thing is dry erase. So once I decided that is the best solution, I started applying it to like all the other spaces. So like
Mm.
um, it made a lot of sense to like map my route on the map itself.
Yeah.
And sorry if you hear a screaming kid in the background,
Yeah.
but but yeah, it seemed to work really well. And there was actually more things I discovered within the dry erase that was mechanics I hadn't seen before. So I'm pretty excited for people to kind of experience how we use dry erase
Yep.
in a dungeon crawler as compared to like a roll and write traditional. So
Yeah, I wish I would see more dry race in games.
mhm.
The number of games that come out of my weekly game night where it's pen and paper. And I'm thinking,
Mhm.
gosh, what a waste, right? Like that could easily be a dry
Yeah.
erase marker. And I get it. I think that some publishers are worried about, well, what if the marker runs out and things like that. But every dollar store has replacement dry erase markers. You can literally get them
Exactly.
anywhere, and they're cheap.
Mhm.
And I myself will try to employ those more going forward. Either that or even digital augmentation, like with maybe a web app or something
Yeah.
like that for scorekeeping and things like that, instead of actually having a pad in the box.
Totally.
That pad adds weight for shipping, it adds bulk, and it adds
Mhm.
waste, right? So good for you for figuring that out. There's 6 different characters. I imagine you can mix and match these, right? How did you come up with the different profiles? And there's some asymmetry there, I imagine, right?
Yep.
And so what was that exercise like, trying to make sure that although they're asymmetric, they still kind of had balance between them, so people don't obviously just keep gravitating to the same 2 characters every time they play?
Right. Yeah. So, I mean, that kind of started out with the original game didn't have a symmetry between it, but it
Yeah.
had branching skills that you could choose that, like, when you would get blood, you could choose to, like, slot it in
Yeah.
a specific action. And then I kept coming up with new action ideas like that you could do around the boat, things you could do to mitigate different beasts. And then I started branching that out into the characters themselves, like what thematically could fit with a mystic. So like the mystic can kind of like foresee what's coming, and she can look into the depth decks and see
Mm.
like what monsters are coming. She can ward one off to the bottom, keep one on the top. That's like a normal mechanic you see in other games too, but it was very thematic to a mystic type who can kind of like see spiritually into the water and kind of see what's coming. Whereas like there was we had throwing daggers and arrows, and how did we want to have those behave after you shoot them? Do they float? Do they sink? Do you have a hook that you can pull a beast around the boat? Like it was like once I started thinking of just any type of weapon, it was like, okay, I I can easily make a lot more characters out of this with very focused ability. And it just kind of naturally happened too. It
Mm.
was kind of like um, I would start doing new mechanic tests on the Vikings, and then I would be like, oh wow, this Viking is really weak against these type of beasts, but very strong against this other type of beast, which is kind of really cool when you start playing with the synergies between
Yeah.
like the two-player play. So you really want to figure out who can be, strong in this one area while and kind of balance with each other. But I think there's enough beasts in here that make it kind of interesting for really any combo too. So,
Yeah, it's super cool. Yeah, I can see like the replayability too with mixing and matching different characters, and if you find that
mhm,
you're, how we fend them off easily in this one. Well, the next one maybe I pick a different character and see if it's going to be the same.
exactly.
See if it's going to
Yeah.
be the same scenario. I do want
Yeah.
to shout out you. You use Launch Boom, who we've had on the
Uh-huh.
podcast. I'm a big fan of them.
Yeah.
And also Backer Kit Marketing, which again I'm
Mhm.
another fan of, and I've used myself. They're fantastic. How instrumental were both those groups for you in your success, would you say?
It was, I mean, uh, I don't even know the scale. It was probably infinite scale of importance that they were on the team because I come from manufacturing, so like I understand the design side of things, I understand the manufacturing side of things, but I actually had a Game Found campaign about a year ago, and I didn't do any marketing for it.
Mm,
I think the art grabbed a lot of attention, and we had like some followers like in the 3 to 4 thousand range, and I was like, okay, these people are backers, but it was kind of more passerby, I think, people. Whereas Launch Boom was really valuable in finding who's your target audience, who is your super backer, um, and basically tailoring all the message to say, here's my game, but also make that connecting for that super backer, um, which I didn't do that at all in the first campaign, which was kind of lackluster. And we decided to do a relaunch, which was amazing because I also got more development time too.
yeah,
Um, but yeah, with launching with them and also BackerKit too, being able to kind of scale our marketing, we were able to actually reach the people who wanted CBs rather than the people saying, "Oh, that's a cool game, but I'm not buying games right now," or what for
yeah,
whatever reason. And that was just really cool too because we've also been able to build our community off of that too. We have like a Discord community that's just like people who love Vikings, love board games, love slaying monsters, and um, I don't think we'd have that community built up in the same way if we didn't partner with Launch Boom or BackerKit too. So yeah,
that's cool.
amazing
I want to give a
partners.
shout out as well to Kagan Productions with Ori.
Yes.
He is the
Yep.
man when it comes to video design, but also
Yep.
advice. Right, he's very good, and he started some recent series on offering different designers and
Yeah.
budding developers or even publishers advice on here's how to really target your market in the right way. And
Yeah. He's also with us too.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, I
We
see him on your page, so
Yeah.
that's why I want to give him a
Yeah.
shout out. He's doing
That's
amazing.
good. Yeah.
And then Long Pack as well. Long Pack, I'm a massive fan of. They are, in my mind, probably the best in terms of manufacturers in China in the board game industry.
Yeah.
I've used them for one game already. I've got them working on our next one, Survivors of Venus, coming up as well. So
Nice.
kudos to you. So you got the right team, is what I'm trying to say here. You got the right team
Yeah.
around you, which
Yeah.
has been
I
amazing.
I'm so thankful for them. I couldn't have done it.
So,
Hell.
like, obviously, you're now in this industry, and I've seen you've just mentioned that earlier that you've got this the first game that maybe you're going to circle back on.
Mhm.
What's next? Is that the plan? Is the plan now to do this that first game now? You've reversed it, and that's the next game coming, or what do you have?
I actually have I have two other games in the chamber right now. So and that I have artists connected with those as well.
Yeah.
So once we get all the print files ready for CBs and I can kind of make my way away from just the design side of
Mm,
CBs, then I'll be probably fully on to these next two games. So yeah, I'm super excited because they're totally different art styles, totally different. They're kind of like one's like a cooperative, half competitive, and then
mm.
there's another one that's a fully competitive game, which I'm super excited to kind of see come to life.
Have you picked timing at all? Like when your next campaign is going to be, or what's the plan?
Yeah, I'm hoping that early 2026 we have the next campaign for sure. I know we'll probably do a reprint of Sea Beast as well at some point, just because more people will see that coming out and will want to get it. So, but I'm hoping early 2026 for the next game.
And that pocket edition too.
Oh yeah,
I'll be looking for that pocket edition.
Yes, yeah, that will probably be in a reprint campaign for sure.
Oh, that's amazing.
Yeah.
Well, you know, Aaron, I want to wish you all the best on this campaign. I am so happy for you. For those who want to check this out, I am putting a link in the show notes. You can always just go to Kickstarter and type in Sea Beast. You'll find it right away if it's not on your For You page already. Given the way it's funded, typically it does show up on your For You page. But man, for the first kind of kick on Kickstarter, you have done just a bang up job. Clearly, this is evident of the homework you've done going into this. And it's always refreshing to see, these creators that, there's kind of two camps, right? People kind of fall into success and then they're kind of like, okay, now what do we do? And those who, plan for success and really kind of formulate them all and make sure that they have their ducks in a row going into this, I would put you in that camp for sure. So I think people have a high confidence that this is going to deliver and they'll get this game in their hands. And I'm sure people are going to be looking for the rest of the great things that Littlest Lantern has to come.
Yeah.
All the best, my friend, in 2025 to you.
Yeah, you as well. Thank you so much, James.
All right, buddy. You take care. Cheers. This has been an episode of the Board Game Binge podcast, hosted by James Staley, produced by James Staley and Mike Bruner, with original music by Nick Smith. If you would like to watch these interviews live, simply subscribe to our YouTube channel, Board Game Binge, and you'll get access to live interviews, giveaways, and interesting board game content from across the industry. I can't wait for you to join us. See you next time.